Africa is reported to be the least urbanized continent, but having the highest rate of urbanization. This high rate of population influx to urban areas is ironically comparable to the growth. About 60% of Africa's population lives in slums. The slums are squalid and not well planned. They pose a challenge in the provision of sustainable sanitation in cities. Uganda, like most African countries, is faced with the issue of slum areas. They are mainly concentrated around Kampala and other urban areas like Entebbe, Mbarara, Jinja, Gulu, Mbale, Lira, and Arua, among others. Uganda's Bwaise is much similar to Kibera slum in Kenya and Soweto of South Africa. Slum areas are an epitome of poverty and squalor. Providing sustainable sanitation in slums is a big challenge. Lack of legal status of slum areas, laced with poor accessibility, limited funding for sanitation systems, and population dynamics. Bwaise is a typical slum area around Uganda's city of Kampala. It is bubbling with poor sanitation, flooding and poverty. This area was originally a wetland, but reclaimed for settlement as a result of rural-urban migration. The area is characterized by frequent flooding in the rain seasons, compounded by poor drainage, poor sanitation facilities, poor accessibility, and lack of a solid waste management system. This has resulted into a public health risk and pollution of the environment. Waterborne diseases have subsequently emerged, leading to diseases like dysentery, cholera, diarrhea, and malaria.
N'ensiri zenyini nizeyongera omusujja ngwongera kutabata Bwaise ogw'amaanyi bwagenda nga mulago osanga omukazi waliti nga group eva Bwaise yesinga.
Kawempe health officials say there is a link between poor sanitation and a number of diseases in the area. Groundwater and surface water are also heavily polluted with organic matter nutrients and heavy metals. This results into deterioration of the water quality downstream. The water quality within Makshin Bay of Lake Victoria, for example, has deteriorated because it receives a lot of pollutants from the city, and most especially from informal settlements and slums. In order to contribute to provision of sustainable sanitation in urban slums, a research project codenamed SCUSA was carried out by UNESCO IHE Institute for Water Education in collaboration with Makerere University and Kampala City Council.
One of the research components SCUSA project is looking at sanitation technologies for urban slums. There are a number of sanitation technologies that have been used somewhere else in other regions, and they can be adopted and implemented and tested in a slum. And in particular, we are looking at the best way of how we can select suitable technologies so they can be used in urban slums on a sustainable basis. Another component, we are looking at quantification of the microbial risks emanating from the discharge of waste streams in urban areas. Here we are looking at grey water, solid waste and surface water that are heavily contaminated.
The second part of the SCUSA research project is hydrology. In this part of the research, we are trying to understand the transport of contaminants in urban slum areas. One of the most important contaminants we are looking at as a project are nutrients. In excess, these nutrients lead to deterioration of water resources, and one of the major consequences of this is excessive growth of algae, growth of the water hyacinth, and death of fish and other aquatic organisms in waters. So in this project, we want to understand what are the sources of these nutrients in slum areas and what are the mechanisms that control the transport of these nutrients to downstream areas. Once we know this, we feel we can come up with appropriate strategies in order to improve sanitation in urban slum areas.
As part of the research, Philip constructed the typical gauging station along the Bwaise and Soba drainage channel to measure the flow in the drainage channel in order to understand how much nutrients are released by the slum areas into the water network.
We have 2 of these installed. This is one installed at the inlet of the slum. Then we also have another one further in front at the outlet of the slum. So with these gauging stations, basically to measure discharge. And why do we need discharge is because we are trying to understand the loads of pollutants leaving the slum area, and you need discharge in order to compute these loads.
According to research findings, these nutrients come from pit latrines and infiltration from grey water that is poured on the compound of people's backyards.
But you might be surprised, why is this water not clear? Because this is groundwater which is coming from the ground. It is turning green, and the main reason why it is like this is because of nutrients. In fact, this is one of the things we are trying to study. What is the impact of slums to the nutrient discharge to downstream areas? So since it is green, that means there is a lot of nutrients coming from the ground. And of course, we rate this to the existing on-site sanitation activities in this area.
The impact of this slum on pollution load is much higher than imagined, leading to the contamination of downstream surface water bodies, killing fish and other aquatic organisms. Another big challenge affecting the highly populated areas of Bwaise is overflooding, which destroys people's properties and also results into a major public health problem. Here, when it rains, most families are displaced.
Whenever it rains, we are in a terrible situation.
Kujyawa na mazi tigawaliwo kaga munana gatusegabana twaliyo mazi naye we tusenga wenye abantu gababa bangi nturanga mazi gayongera.
Associate Professor Dr. Jan Willem Foppen from UNESCO IHE highlights issues leading to flooding and how much contaminated water affects Lake Victoria.
There is a lot of flooding, but also important is that this water is heavily contaminated. And it is not only contaminating this area, but it's also contaminating the entire catchment downstream of Bwaise slum.
The majority of the excreta disposal facilities in Bwaise 3 are elevated pit latrines because of high water table. The user load is high, resulting in the pit latrine chambers filling fast. This has resulted in unhygienic practices such as discharging pit contents into the drains during the rainy season and also in an adjacent excavated shallow pit.
There is a problem of solid waste management in Bwaise 3, and one of the problems is that they compromise the hydraulic capacity of these open drainage channels. And as you can see, the culverts are basically covered by the solid waste. Yeah, another problem is that people here use the polythene bags, so-called flying toilets, for excreta disposal, and they end up discharging the contents in the open drainage channels.
when we are doing sampling, we realize that the concentration of pollutants here is actually very, very high compared to the one in the main drain. It was actually something like 10 times more than the one in the main drain.
Spring water is also used by residents for domestic purposes, especially those who cannot afford to pay for piped water. However, the research found out that the springs are contaminated with viruses and bacteria.
So from appearance it looks clean, but actually the water is contaminated. Yeah, we detected pathogenic viruses in this drinking water, and indeed it is a major public health issue.
Grey water accounts for the largest wastewater streams in Bwaise 3. This is mainly due to domestic wastewater.
This is one of the tertiary drains discharging grey water into Soba stream. And as you can see, there is like a street of pit latrines that have bathrooms attached next to the pit latrines, discharging the grey water from the bathroom into this tertiary drain. Yeah, one problem with this tertiary drain is that the slope is marginal. So whenever the grey water is discharged into the drain, it remains stagnant. This problem is made worse by the disposal of the solid waste in the drain.
Another major sanitation problem is how to manage the solid waste. This is Nakamiro Open Channel, the outlet connecting to the mainstream in Soba Channel. It is frequently clogged with solid waste particles such as plastics, polythene bags, and metal scrap.
This tertiary drain is usually clogged by solid particles, and the flow in the tertiary drain is low, and the level of stagnation is very high. We tested this grey water and were able to detect pathogenic waterborne viruses, and indeed it is a big health problem in Bwaise 3.
Poor solid waste management in Bwaise 3 has not only contributed to the blockage of channels, but also led to increased number of breeding places for disease vectors such as mosquitoes and occurrence of waterborne diseases in the area, as the researcher explains.
So this is one of the areas along the Soba channel, and as you can see, it is also clogged with the solid waste particles. Here there is a fresh polythene bag that has been thrown into the channel, and some of them are being used for excreta disposal. The major problem with the sedimentation of the solid waste in these channels is that they sort of reduce the flow in the open channel, and they also act as breeding places for mosquitoes that cause malaria in this area.
Most families here usually prepare and cook food near the drainage channels, which is also a public health risk. But why do residents abandon constructed toilets and resort to flying toilets which pollute the environment?
Azirina water table pumpi bwejura taina access.
In order to disseminate the SCUSA research project findings and allow stakeholder participation in improving sanitation in slums, a stakeholder workshop was held on the 20th of March 2012 at Hotel Africana, Kampala.
And we are trying to disseminate some of our results with the stakeholders to tell them what really happens, and actually we got a very good feedback, which some of the points they put them in our research to further try to understand how we can manage this situation.
Dr. Kalist Tindimugaya, a commissioner of water resources regulation in the Ministry of Water and Environment, highlights the issue of urban groundwater pollution and the related health consequences.
So areas like Bwaise, we have challenges where you have a water source like a spring next to a pit latrine. Then you find that the people are consuming actually polluted water. they defecate in the bitter and what they throw there is the one that comes into their water sources. So what we are looking at the moment is we cannot continue having such situations in slum areas, and there are a number of options. First of all, to improve sanitation options, where you can get sanitation options that don't pollute the water underground.
But what is Kampala City Council Authority's plan on the campaign for sanitation in the slum areas like Bwaise?
We as KCCA, we are going to reinforce on the enforcement, because by law that you are in a city, you are in a community, such as in the city, you have to have a facility, a sanitation facility. So we are going to have a multitude of interventions, community sensitization, using the guidelines and laws, ordinances, and then improving on the infrastructure.
This project has demonstrated that slum areas contribute a lot of nutrients which impair water resources downstream. Existing springs used as domestic water sources are contaminated with waterborne viruses and bacteria. Most nutrients originate from grey water, and there is a strong need to manage grey water in urban slums. The findings seem to suggest that we may have to continue promoting the use of improved toilets to minimize nutrients discharged from slum areas. Existing sanitation systems are unsuitable, and there is still need to address collection, transport, treatment of waste, and the reuse or safe disposal of the end product to minimize public health risks and environmental pollution.